event. The topic of the day is how to think like a product manager and build an AI-ready RevOps engine. And today we are sitting down with Cass Ernst Faletto, who is a Senior Director of Revenue Operations over at Pendo. And so, Cass, before we get into everything, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and why this topic is so interesting and one you're so passionate about as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me today. Very excited about this conversation. I'm Cass. I lead a global RevOps team here at Pendo, and I've been here since January. So I've been here for about a year. And prior to Pendo, I was leading the revenue operations team at a company called JustWorks, New York based, for about nearly 6 years. Passion lies again in all things RevOps and data, but I would say I'm particularly interested in this specific topic. One, because Pendo, if you don't know what Pendo does or what it is, I definitely urge you to go to our website. But also, it is built for product managers, and I'm thinking about how the RevOps world is changing, especially in the era of AI. And so really thinking about like the company that I'm at, but also the team that I lead and how things are evolving with AI in the next couple of months, quarters, years. Things are moving really fast. And so always making sure to be evolving and thinking through that.
Yeah. And I love this topic because, if you look at revenue operations as a role, as a function, there's so much that goes into that across people, process, and technology. And now you sprinkle kind of all this AI stuff in the mix. And I think RevOps is uniquely positioned to be even more critical, even more relevant to a business and driving relevant business outcomes and approaching revenue operations like a product that you're delivering to your revenue team is a great way to approach this kind of builder mindset as we head into 2026. And so with that, why don't you walk us through? You mentioned, you've been in revenue operations for a while. You've kind of seen this evolution yourself firsthand. You've lived it. You're now obviously living and experiencing this leading revenue operations at Pendo. So talk to us about the different eras of revenue operations. If this is the eras tour of RevOps, tell us. I don't know if we want to compare this to T Swift or if you got anything there, but walk us through 1.0, 2.0, what this 3.0 sort of looks like.
Yeah, I'd say comparing this to T Swift is a high bar, but no, I would say so. RevOps, RevOps 1.0, and I think probably a lot of people on this call would agree with me, hopefully. But really, it was just the start of RevOps, and honestly, it was called Sales Ops before. It was just very much working with sales leaders and being very, very reactive, being order takers. Some people might say like we still, do that today. I think like the move ideally has been more to the proactive side. But really, back in the day, it was tactical. It was you're in spreadsheets, you're being asked by your sales leaders to do X, Y, and Z. You go, change something in Salesforce, and the day moves on. RevOps 2.0, and I want to say, it was about maybe like 6, 7 years ago. It's really kind of thinking about the entire customer funnel. And so you're really thinking about, and you're data driven, you're thinking about marketing, you're thinking how it affects sales, you're thinking about customer success, you're bridging all those gaps, you're thinking about all the systems that go together, you're thinking about all the processes that go together. You're really a thought partner, you're involved in conversations early on, you're in the room. So it's really important to think through just like strategic ownership of what RevOps is doing as a RevOps 2.0 time. And we're now entering what I would call a RevOps 3.0 phase, which I'll talk a little bit about after. But it's really a new phase in the era of AI. And I would love to kind of know from this group what people think the RevOps 3.0 world is. If we kind of had a tactical RevOps 1.0, a strategic RevOps 2.0, and then what would be kind of the word that describes, or maybe spoiler alert, 2 words that describe what RevOps 3.0 is. So I think you
Yeah.
all have a pop up right now.
Yep. Yeah, I just launched a poll that folks can go ahead and answer. And I'll leave this open for a little bit, but yeah, I just want to talk through, I know what I've seen here in terms of revenue operations evolving. So RevOps Co-op has been around now for, I want to say 5+ years, 5.5 years. And so we've definitely kind of lived through a lot of this. And if you look at where it started, like you have here, mostly sales focus, sales operations, makes sense. A lot of what we've always focused on historically has been driving growth through new business, new logo acquisition. It was kind of a linear journey, linear funnel. So that sort of approach made sense. You move to RevOps 2.0 and the strategic element you have here. And the thing that jumps out at me is really this full customer journey, this full customer life cycle. We realize that, hey, we've got this whole thing of land and expand. We care about NRR. We, need to upsell, cross sell to our customers. We've got to market to our customers, right? There's all this overlap between these teams. We need someone to be responsible to help us, kind of sift through all this stuff. And now, yeah, we've got, RevOps 3.0, and it's like, okay, like now we've got AI. We're like, kind of building stuff. Like, what does this all mean? And so I'm gonna close the poll question here momentarily, but while I do that, and I'll see if I can find some of the answers that we have here, Cass, how would you answer this question? Or can you give us like maybe a one or, 2 word, sort of answer if you were sitting in the audience today, what your response would be?
Yeah, like you said one of the words just now, but thinking through the world of AI, there is a lot that we can do on the RevOps side that is quite different than what we used to do. And you use the word builder, and I think for me, that's something that I'll focus on, in my presentation, but really thinking through like this new world of RevOps being able to build, because before we weren't really be able to do that when it comes to processes and all of that. Thank you. Muted.
Sorry. I had all this insightful stuff to say. I just muted myself so that I could not let you all hear my cough. So what I was saying, I was sharing my screen there. And I'm gonna pull the slides back up as I talk here. But there's lots of talk on AI native, AI customer strategist, agent manager, which is I think very interesting when you consider, kind of these agents, right, as teammates. So let's get into, I guess, some of the details on maybe Cass, what you see from for RevOps 3.0, and at least how this whole notion of what we can borrow from product management kind of plays into
Yeah.
this.
So before like the big RevOps 3.0 reveal, I do really like agent manager.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. But I'll actually walk you through an example of what we did here at Pendo, which I think will, put into perspective why I think RevOps 3.0 is what I'm saying it is. But basically, I don't know if everyone in this room is familiar with the software development lifecycle, but that is a project management framework that a lot of people use. And it's really thinking about iterating, but iterating constantly and always iterating to make sure that things are better. So you plan, put a plan together, discover. That's a lot of interviews, qualitative information, research. You design kind of what you want something to look like, build, obviously, and you can go through that process without having to, test ship all the time. You can plan, discover, design, and then go back to plan, discover, design, build. You test a lot, and then obviously ship to, different organizations. So I'll walk you through one specific example, which was Agentforce. So and I'll talk through kind of all the demos that we did last year, or this year actually, but we did a lot of demos this year, and we did a demo of Agentforce, which is Salesforce new, agent mode, and we thought about kind of like all the cases that our team manages on a day to day. So we get about 4,300 cases per quarter from our
Oh,
sales reps.
wow.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a lot. We are not a very large team either. And we sift through those. And if you look at specifically all of those cases, like they are very repetitive. Like we are doing the same thing again and again. Like we're merging accounts, like we're changing the hierarchy of accounts, like we're, deleting a website and updating for another website. So it's just a lot of tasks that we keep doing over and over again. And so Agentforce was a really great example to kind of think through like, okay, like how can we take this and basically build something that is going to completely, save us a lot of hours, but also be rep friendly? Because as a rep, why wouldn't you want, your issue to be fixed within like a minute rather than having to wait for 2 hours for RevOps to reply?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know what I'd pick.
So we took kind of like this like software development lifecycle, approach on how we were going to go about this. So obviously, now that we have ChatGPT, it's very easy to summarize, categorize all the historical cases. So we really looked at what is, taking a lot of the team's time, but isn't like very high value. It's not complex. And so we came with 4 specific use cases from specifically looking at the data. However, we also realized, and if we go kind of like looking at the discovery side, we realized that we also needed to interview people. We needed to understand, their frustrations or like what would be really important to use Agentforce. So we really took that, again, approach of not just planning and using ChatGPT in a Google Sheet, but also discovering and doing the research, which to me is very important in the RevOps world. It's very easy to be behind spreadsheets and just think that reps think a certain way, but actually talking and taking the time, you kind of get a lot more nuggets of information.
Yeah, 100%. I think the rep interview piece, I think what I like about this and what we're walking through is it gives a really clear place in terms of where that fits. I hear from a lot of people like, oh, go out and talk to your end users, right? Go out and talk to the reps, go out to talk to the frontline, the CSMs, the AMs, the folks that are interacting with your customers. But it's like, wow, that's great advice. It's like, where does that fit? Like how do I use what I learned there across, a framework, right? Like something that can actually drive better outcomes. So yeah, makes tons of sense. So on the design side, then it sounds like you've got a couple of use cases now and a pilot that you're ready to
Correct.
launch.
Yeah, so kind of you take this plan, you take like these interviews, and you can't like we're not gonna just take the 4,300 cases and automate tomorrow. You have to prioritize and you have to look at the data. And so we actually came up with 4 use cases that were like high volume, took quite a bit of time from the team, and we knew that we would, be able to work on different things if we were able to take those away. So it was account merge, account hierarchy changes, account website changes, because we got a lot of those, and commissions record updates. And so what we did was we did a pilot with 15 users, which I think is extremely important, especially in those cases, to A/B test what you're launching, making sure that it's accurate, making sure that people are using the chatbot in the right way. We were worried because the way that this is priced is we were worried that people would just try and chat in like anything. And then, it's just like these are the 4 use cases. But we also were actually curious if people, these 15 users were chatting in anything, like what were they asking? So what are they looking for from, Agentforce and Salesforce? And so actually, if you go to the next,
And
we,
I have, before you get there, I have a
yeah.
couple of questions. All right. So first, so these four use cases, you said this came out of the analysis you did in the plan phase, right? Where you kind of looked at all your different cases and you kind of prioritized them, broke them down and categorized and broke them down into buckets, right? So now you've got, kind of four use cases. You also, through the discovery rep interviews, is also how you kind of determined where those things landed. So that's how we got to the four use cases. Then you did a pilot for 15 users. So first question, how many total users do you have? Because I'm curious, like 15 out of how many? And why did you choose 15?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we launched to 250 reps at the end of the day. So it was about like a 6, 7% in terms of just like user. Why 15? Honestly, it was also where we were in the quarter. We launched this close to an end of quarter. And so we were taking, one or two reps from each team to make sure that we had a good array of just in terms of we're global. So we wanted, one or two reps from our EMEA office, one or two reps from a commercial team, one or two reps from the Americas. And it just worked out that it was going to be 15. We wanted it to be less than 10% of total, just to manage, again, expectations, feedback, and really to be able to spend time with those reps. We had a Slack channel, we held a meeting. And so as soon as you make that way bigger, it's really hard to coordinate.
Yeah, makes sense. And then I know you said you wanted a good kind of cross section of people. Did you use any specific criteria to figure out I'll say who made the cut, but like who were those 15 people? Was it like, oh, hey, I know like person A, B, and C are, I don't know, they're like super RevOps friendly. They love trying new things. They don't care when stuff breaks. Like, how did you approach actually selecting then the people that you wanted to launch your pilot with?
We used our best friend ChatGPT and took the data set and basically based on all those teams who actually makes the most cases. So we wanted to make sure as well that we were putting in the
The
pilot
power users.
exactly like the people
Yeah.
that were making the cases. Like there have been people who have never made a case, and so putting them in the pilot probably wouldn't be the best decision. And so it was
Yeah.
really those power users by different teams.
Yep. All right. And then before we get on to the build, one question in the audience from Henry was just asking about what inspired the decision to use Agentforce versus exporting data and doing analysis with something like Claude or Gemini.
To use agent for, I'm not sure I follow.
Henry, if you got clarification, throw it into the chat and we can come back
Yeah.
to that. So all right, let me move on from then design to build. All right, so we're in build mode. Now what?
Yeah, so we're in build mode. We focused specifically the first one on account merges, but we still did all four and really thought about, okay, like what is, how do we build for account merges? Because obviously we don't want to be merging the wrong accounts together. We don't want to be merging customers. There is quite a bit of work to be done. So there was a lot of logic to be managed in the background. But we wanted it to be like a simple interface for reps. So it was to be asked, who do you want who do you want the primary account to be? What are you merging? And being able to do that seamlessly on the rep user interface.
Yeah. And all right, Henry clarified. So Agentforce versus using any of those other models I mentioned through like APIs or MCPs.
Got it. It was just honestly easier. We also just to be honest, like with Salesforce, are quite a big user of Salesforce in our org, and everyone lives and breathes there. Agentforce just proved to be also an easier build for us in general, and so we kind of took that approach.
Makes sense. Yeah. All right, so we got a V1. Next is test.
Yeah, so I think this is where it got really interesting because I think, all these chatbots and all these like agents, et cetera, you actually wonder like how are people interacting with the chatbot.
Yep.
And I will say, like the analytics piece, and I'm a big analytics person, like wasn't honestly great. You kind of like didn't understand what people were asking or, where people were getting stuck, et cetera. And so we actually used our internal tool here at Pendo called Pendo Agent Analytics. And so we put that on top of Agentforce, and we were able to understand straight away what people were doing. And so we could actually understand like what people were asking in the chatbot, which gave us ideas for the next times. We were focused on those four use cases, but then we kind of built, a roadmap on what we wanted to launch in Agentforce. But we were also able to see where people got stuck. So one of the things with this is that we had to ask for just to be, we couldn't ask for account name to be merged because obviously there could be human error. You could be paste date, like something. So we had to ask for account ID, and people didn't actually know where to find account ID. They were just struggling to
Oh,
find where do you like, you can find in the URL, you can find the details page, but that's maybe something that like we don't think of as RevOps. And I was like, everyone's going to know how to find account
Yeah,
ID.
we know where that is.
Duh. And so, yeah, people didn't actually know where to find account ID. And so what we did was actually like we were able to guide people through, and we use guides on Pendo, but we were able to guide people on how to find account ID. And so that was really powerful for us because it really helped us understand during our testing phase where people were getting stuck, how to help them before we kind of went GA with it and launched to 250 people who probably have similar questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that example too because it is, like I've tried, I mean, I'm still trying to like build software products, right, that you bring to market. And those are the things when like you just take so much for granted in terms of how you navigate, how you click, all those things that you know about, and then you put something in front of someone else for the first time and you realize like, yeah, account ID, like a lot of, if you're not in revenue operations, chances are you're not going to naturally just know where to go and find that. And then you again as the product manager for this, like you got to figure out how to address that. And I'm sure there were other things that probably popped up beyond the account ID as well.
There's definitely a lot that's popped up. And now that we've, met, like this was in September and we've launched other use cases, there's definitely been a lot more data. But this is why I really love kind of this framework and following this kind of software lifecycle development framework because you really make sure at every step that you're not just kind of launching something that's not going to stick or that people don't understand. Like, and it's important to test. And then obviously, the end goal is to ship it. So we launched it to 250 plus reps. We now don't do any account merges, account hierarchy changes, website changes, or commission records updates that I mentioned. We have a couple of other use cases in the works as well. But it's been really, really helpful, and we've decreased our cases to about, I mean, we still have cases, unfortunately, but to about 2,000 a quarter, which I know still sounds quite high. That means we decreased by more than 60%. And the other thing to note as
Yeah,
well
it's
is,
incredible.
we're really trying to reduce that, but there will always be some, human in the loop at one point. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And that's still, I mean, like that's still a huge a huge improvement. And like you said, I think it's I don't know, it's like it'd be very unrealistic to think you're going to go from where you were at to zero just overnight. And maybe that's even one of the things that I think a lot of people maybe head into, I don't know, call it like AI projects, I'll say more broadly, like thinking that they're going to be able to make some like ginormous leap in a very short period of time. I think the main thing is like one, you probably won't, and but two, you don't have to, right? Like, like look at all the progress you made. You said over like how much time, and like now you're gonna probably continue to iterate on this. You'll run these cycles again. You'll figure out how you can get that down from the 2,000 probably to 1,000, right? And eventually, like you'll just chip away. But the whole point is to make progress, not to do it all at once and then be done with it, right?
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of sometimes you approach these things where like, oh, like if it's not gonna go down to zero, like another example which I'll talk to you about later, like, oh, if it's not gonna be fully adopted by everyone, like I just don't think it's worth us working through this. And I would completely disagree because like this progress, especially with AI, like those small changes, like if you add like 5 minutes per case and you times it by 2,300, like that's a lot of time saved that you can be putting on other projects.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's talk about RevOps 3.0 then.
Yeah, so this is the big reveal. Obviously, like still, strategic in nature, but the big word that we're adding here for RevOps 3.0 is really builders. Being able to ship things and build things a lot more than we used to, especially with AI. So, we're not just buying software anymore. We can actually build things in-house. We can also, make sure that it's going to be, actually I'm looking at the chat and I said, I like the go-to-market orchestration because it is like you're buying, building, you're orchestrating these
Yeah.
things too. So it's not a bad, I do like that. And it probably might change. And, in the world of AI, we might have a 4.0 in 6 months because things went so fast. But it's also the other thing I want to highlight, it's also about jobs to be done. So I think in RevOps 2.0, I specifically talked about, okay, like aligning marketing with sales and customer success, but you're still talking about marketing, sales, and customer success. Jobs to be done, when I think about jobs to be done, is thinking about, okay, like what is our pipeline workflow? What is like our, go to like X go to market workflow? What is Y? And so you're not thinking about like specific teams anymore, but you're really thinking about like the actual job to be done. So that's kind of like where my head's at least for what's next for RevOps 3.0. But this is ever changing right now in the space that we're in, and I'm really excited to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, the coolest part is that we get to live and breathe this evolution, right? So, all right, so if if RevOps 3.0 is this, call it strategic, plus builder sort of era, then I guess as it relates to launching a new RevOps process, or maybe you got a new tool in the mix, or a new agent, or a new piece of AI technology, whatever it is, right? How should people think about that getting adopted throughout the revenue org? Since I know we've been talking a lot about adoption as well.
Yeah. I'd actually be curious from the group because I talked a little bit about adoption, but I would love to know, like, from, everyone in this room, when you launch, new and like things, like what do you think about it when you think about adoption?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got the poll launch. How often do you delay launching a new RevOps process or tool because you're worried it won't get 100% adopted? And as we let people answer that, I think back, actually, now that I see this question, I think back to, let's see, it was 2017. I was building my first software technology product startup. And I remember this one piece of, I guess I'll call it advice or feedback that a fellow, founder gave me multiple times over. And they said, if you're not embarrassed by the V1 of the product that you launch, then you did not launch it soon enough. Meaning, like, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be things in there that you're just going to like cringe about, but that's okay because you're not letting perfection be the enemy of good. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. And Cass, before I share the results, where do you think most people are going to land in terms of their answer?
I'm hoping not at 100% adoption, and I'm hoping more in like, like let's try it out and kind of like the lower, like 50%, or, at least it's better to try situation. So, well, I'm very curious. Okay, that's a good,
Yeah.
yeah, rarely progress over perfection.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's a very good mix. I think, that sometimes I try, but I'll settle for most or all the time. I think those will talk through why, it to change kind of that narrative. And I used to be that person, by the way. And honestly, it was like 2 years ago where if I didn't think that something would be adopted 100% of the time, especially because you're putting a lot of work in, like you're changing something, you're
Yeah.
changing the process, you want people to be compliant. And if people aren't going to adopt it, like why would I put all my efforts into launching this right now when I could be working on something else? But I've really changed that narrative, and I've actually adopted kind of like a new way of thinking from the product world. If we look at like the adoption curve of just in general of products, you'll see kind of, and I'm sure everyone has seen this curve before. I don't think it's going to be like a aha moment, but if you align this in the way of thinking of in RevOps and when you're launching things, it could be an aha moment where most people don't adopt straight away. It really takes time. And so if you're assuming that your sales floor or your stakeholders are going to adopt 100% of the time straight away, I would urge you to think about this product adoption curve, because really most people, It does take some time. You'll have like the innovators who probably will be want to be part of your test group or your beta group. And really, I've had reps come to me and be like, anything that you do with AI, like I'm here, like I really want to be part of the group. And that's amazing. But then you'll have others who are like, you know what, the way that I work, I don't feel like changing right now. And the way that I work suits me. And so really just spending too much time with those people and spending too much time just catering and trying to get 100% adoption for those individuals is not worth it right now, especially if you can move the needle for some people.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day about like the middle 60 of like we were talking about as it relates to sales teams, how you got like a bunch of people, right, that drive a lot of revenue, new revenue for your sales team. And then let's say they're the top 20%, bottom 20% are folks that you spend a lot of time trying to manage and improve and get better. And then there's like kind of this middle ground that can tend to be ignored a bunch. And, again, like you have limited resources availability, like you're never going to be able to get to 100%. So it's about where do you place your effort and yeah, making sure that you're not overly focused on any one particular group because then you're not going to deliver value to anybody as a whole.
Yeah, and you can actually look at, kind of like these stats speak for themselves from the product world. It's about 15.6% is the average feature adoption for best-in-class products for all companies of all sizes. So if you, again, are striving, if you're just like, changing something and striving for 100% adoption from your org, think about that. Think about like best-in-class products only have a 15.6% adoption rate. We have
That
this
seems so
core.
low.
It is,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
But yes and no, because if you think about it, like products just launch like a lot of features, and
Yeah.
sometimes, especially like we manage on the RevOps world, probably a lot of tools. And I'm sure people have gotten a lot of emails and be like, we just released X, we just released Y. And it's important to like all those releases are very important, but you'll only care about the ones that do change the needle for you. And it's probably the same for your sales floor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, we do this even with RevOps Co-op in terms of trying to provide a lot of different types of programs to our members because we know, and again, if we look at our programs as different features, we know, for example, that not everyone's going to want to participate in a Slack group, for example, as part of our community, but maybe those people are going to be the ones who show up to these digital events. And a lot of people here on these digital events, maybe they love these digital events, but they never go to any of our in-person events that we do. But we have some people who are like all in on the in-person stuff and they show up to literally everything. And so I guess it makes sense when I kind of look at it that way is, you are as a company, right? You're trying to deliver value to a lot of different types of people. And so, yeah, if you look at things across a whole, I can see why 15% then would be considered best in class.
And you're not going to stop the in-person events because not everyone goes, or you're
Of
not going to
course.
stop,
Yeah.
the digital
Yeah.
events because that not everyone goes. And that's kind of like the point. It's like you try these different things to cater to these different people, and you're not striving for 100%.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. We talked a lot about kind of, the software development life cycle and then obviously this adoption curve and not waiting for 100%. Another thing that we did that's kind of, similar and bringing it back to thinking like a product manager is looking at our competition. And when I say looking at our competition, I want to be clear, we're not looking at Pendo's competition, we're looking at the go-to-market competition. Like as a RevOps team, like what does the go-to-market world look like today? And so we actually demoed 40 plus tools in one quarter. It was a lot. It definitely took a lot of time. It was a lot of people in the demos. It wasn't just myself. But we really wanted to understand, this was back in May, June, July. We wanted to understand like what is the art of the possible? Like what are people building out there? It's very easy to do demos, and that's kind of like the way I used to think about demos before doing this exercise was very much like, okay, we have a specific issue at Pendo, and this was kind of like in the RevOps 2.0 era. We have this specific issue right now. I need a tool to help me solve this. Like, let me go and demo like 3, 4 tools that help me for this. and then we'll buy one. We did something completely different. Like we came in and we didn't have a single issue that we were trying to solve. We wanted to just understand like what does this tool do for us in the go-to-market space? Like, how do you use this tool in the go-to-market space? I think for some sellers, it was hard to sell based on kind of like us just asking like, what does your tool do? And like, how do you use it? Yeah,
I can
that was
imagine the
definitely
like, yeah, their brains aren't wired to respond that way. It's like, no, you tell me the problems you have so that I can like tell you how our solution solves them, right?
it was exactly that. It's like, but what are your use cases? And we're like, well,
Yeah.
you tell us what our use cases are. It was definitely interesting, but it was also, really eye-opening. And we also would ask, like, how does your internal RevOps team use this? So just to kind of understand, like, do
That's a
you
great
use it? Do you
question.
not? Which I always find fascinating because if you're not using your own like go-to-market tool, like, are we missing
Why?
something?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it was really, really interesting. We really, we understood that a lot of the things that are built were, similar, a little bit different. But what we took from it is really thinking through what we can build in-house. Like we didn't go out and buy 40 tools. We honestly, we didn't even buy like a single one of those that are listed here. We really just did it to understand, okay, this is how people are building today. This is what the tools are doing. What can we do in-house? There's, Lovable, Supabase, all those tools that we can really build in-house, build these new workflows, build these new processes. We don't need to add 10 tools to our tech stack. So that was for us at least making sure that we have a pulse on what I call the competition. Not that like we're building go-to-market tools here at Pendo, but for us on the RevOps side is like, what could we build in-house versus like, what do we need to go and buy?
Yeah. And how, yeah, I guess do you can you share any specifics on like I don't know, I'm curious like the build versus buy stuff is I think I mean I was talking to someone about did a podcast recording with someone yesterday on that sort of topic. So as a operator, sitting in the seat, right, leading a, large RevOps org, how yeah, how I mean obviously I'm sure you probably build a bunch of stuff, you've probably bought a bunch of tools as well. Like what are I don't know, what are the trade-offs? How do you think about that? What can you share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely not like a hey, you have to build everything or hey, you have to,
Yeah.
buy anything, buy like everything. Like I'm very much in the middle, but what I like to understand is like one, like how complex is our internal process? If I'm going to be spending hours on end with a tool that I'm buying because our process is very different to all the other processes that you've seen, like let's just build something in-house.
Yeah.
And I actually have like an example that we'll walk through about book building. But if it's something that's very generic, it's like, hey, like, let's take an example of just like round robin leads. Like, why would I build a tool to round robin leads in Salesforce? It's a very like simple. I'm gonna go buy a tool that helps me do that. But if it's very again Pendo specific knowledge or something like we're trying to build in-house and we're in the plan phase of the software development lifecycle right now for it, but we're trying to build something around ROE so that we don't have to be the ones answering all these ROE questions or all these ROE cases. And that, like, we have to build something in house. Like, our ROE is very specific to us. It's like our 17-page document. We, own it. I don't think there's a tool out there that is going to like master how we think about ROE at Pendo. And so, like, that's kind of the way that I think about build versus buy. But again, I'm always open to both.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like if I were to take what you just mentioned, what I was thinking about was like it's kind of like think about the cost to maintain
Mhm.
anything that you're either going to build or buy, and then think about if you as a company are trying to kind of cram the way you do business into the tool. Like if you're trying to like if you feel like you're trying to make it work for your specific use case, then it's you're probably better off building something, right? But to your point, if it's a very generic problem that you have that a bunch of other businesses have that you don't think is specific to you, buy something, cost to maintain is going to be very low. That's a, best in class sort of product solution, right? No need to go out and recreate the wheel.
And I've had that happen before where we've literally, and this was not a Pendo, but this was at my prior role, we bought a tool and for an entire year, we were trying to cram our process in that tool. And it was the amount of time
Yeah.
spent and just like, it was just it was a lot. And so it's very important at the beginning to kind of understand like your internal process.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right. Well, let's talk about as we usher in the new builder press, strategic, sort of RevOps 3.0 era. Let's talk about the skill sets that are needed for
Yeah.
this.
So I just actually, Jamar, I just saw like the chat pop up about a lot of the hackathon things are going to fail because you need 3 or 4 engineers. And I wholeheartedly agree, but there are also, and that's why thinking about vibe coding and these hackathon is important in the software development lifecycle. And I'm actually going to walk through an example that worked with us. And so we did kind of do a hackathon, and then we actually made it reality and it works today. So, and we'll talk through that, but it is an interesting point.
Yeah. All right. Let me get to this one for you.
So these are kind of the 4 things that I think about when you're thinking about, hiring for a RevOps team or thinking through the people that you need. And obviously you want someone who can experiment fast, that isn't scared of just like trying something. And I really loved what you said about like, if you're like the first V1 of a product, like why are you making it perfect? And like why are you, looking for it to be great? It's just first V1, let's go ship it fast, let's try it. So someone who's really thinking that way, obviously systems thinker on the RevOps side, AI collaborative, but really the builder mindset and really taking all those skills and applying it basically on like what we do every day in RevOps. And so we're actually going to go through another case study, which I'm sure will be, people will relate potentially, but we spend hours on end and don't ask me why, that's just the way it is. We spend hours on end building books here at Pendo and always reshuffling books, and there's like movement, internal, external, and so we're always just making sure that people have fair books in Google Sheets, changing things, tweaking things, etc. So we actually did a hackathon back in August, and one of the hackathon ideas was, okay, like let's and when I say building books, I mean just like the book of business that you have. So all the accounts that you own in Salesforce, what are those accounts? And so we're always shifting accounts basically. And so we did a hackathon in August, and one of, we used Lovable and Supabase, and it was really fun. It was like 4 hours with the RevOps team, sparked a lot of ideas, but it is one of those where like, you just kind of have a UI UX and it doesn't really work in the back end. But we thought about, okay, what if we just did like a book building app that actually helped us do that? Like it shouldn't be this hard. And we shouldn't always be in Google Sheets. And so we kind of took again the software development lifecycle and thinking about like what are the skills that you need for someone on your RevOps team. And we had someone on the team who has like a huge builder mindset and really think through, okay, if I am to build this in Lovable and Supabase and vibe code this and basically have a working app, like how would I take this? And it's not just going into Lovable and just typing and vibe coding and saying like build me a book building app. Like you really need to plan, to discover, to design, and then you can do like the vibe coding or the hackathon part and build. But if you don't do those 3 steps before, like your app is not going to work. You're going to need like 3, 5 engineers to basically keep it running. So we took, the data set, and you can see kind of like a couple slacks of people of like why it was so frustrating. Like people are like, why did this account move? Like I'm confused. Like I don't understand my book of business. So very frustrated reps.
Yeah. As long as they were good accounts that were getting moved. If they were the bad accounts, then of course they're like, you know what? I don't care about this.
Exactly. Especially the why did Amazon get moved out of my book of
Yeah,
business?
I want that one. Yeah.
Exactly. So we did a lot of interviews again, similar to, Agentforce. We spent a lot of time with people, not just this time. It wasn't just sales reps this time or, leadership, but it was also like people on the RevOps team, people who were doing this work. We actually just recorded on Zoom, and then we pulled it all in ChatGPT, which gave like summarization of just like key points that helped us. But this was like very, very helpful to kind of discover the biggest pain points when building. And then we designed it. We kind of, and when you're thinking of a designing and like what skills you need someone to have, like you want someone who is thinking about AI, who's thinking about rapid experimentation. So with our plan, with kind of like our analysis, we designed something in Lovable that looks like this right now. And it gives us a high overview of, how much customer AR you have, how many customer accounts, prospect accounts, etc. And then you can actually see in the little tab, it might be really small, but you see like you have the data overview, you have the assignments, you have the balancing, you have the clashes. And so assignments is what we used to do in Google Sheets for hours on end, reassigning and looking if is it fair, is it not? Whereas now we literally have AI and this app do that for us in matters of seconds, basically.
That is so cool.
And yeah, this is kind of the last piece, systems thinker. We have kind of making sure, and we work with, the more on the Salesforce developer and Salesforce admin side on making sure that this kind of like it does. So that's what I was thinking on the system thinker, making sure that it flows. So we're not just thinking about just like a random app here and it's just like we have to import CSVs, export CSVs, but really thinking about like how do we bring in the data from Salesforce into this app and then bring it back out. So now we're not just doing all this manual work. That is like, part of this, making sure that we're thinking through all of it. But that is today what our app looks like for book building. We are in FY27 planning right now. And so the fact that we have this and we're able to use this is going to be a huge time saver. And if you think about just all the different fiscal year plannings that we've done in the past, of spending like 2, 3 weeks of not just even RevOps being in those Google Sheets, but also having, sales leaders have to be in the Google Sheet, et cetera. We actually now have a leadership view that they come in and they can write notes. And we actually send those notes back to Salesforce so that we can gather the data rather than having that data live in Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Really proud of this. And that's kind of like the type of people that you need on your RevOps team when they're doing book building over and over again. Like, how do you get someone to ask themselves, why am I doing this over and over again every single year or like spending 3 weeks? And how can I automate it? And let's go either buy or either build it.
Yeah. And that you said the book builder app, it obviously pulled in data from Salesforce and then it pushed data back in as well after like
So
you
that
made whatever
is,
adjustments, or is
I don't
that
want to, I don't
TBD?
want to lie. We have the import, the export is TBD. Still figuring things out. This has been like the 3, 4 months in the making, but that is our
Yeah.
hope.
Hey, I mean, that's the builder mindset that we were just talking about, right? Like that's the development life cycle. It you obviously you need the import before you can do anything with the export. So solve the import problem before you figure out how to push the data back into your CRM. Let's see. A couple of questions, Cass, just from the chat, just since we have a few minutes. Um, so you said you have, call it these AI chops on your RevOps team. How should people think about, if they're hiring for their RevOps team, this sort of talent, if people maybe are excuse me, out there looking for a new RevOps job and they want to get better at stuff like this, how should operators think about growing their team so that they hire the right people that can do things like this? How should people themselves think about up leveling, making their own selves better? How should people think about that part?
Yeah, so we do have what we call, and I'm sure people are aware of this new title, but on the team actually go-to-market engineers. So we have 2 go-to-market engineers that we hired. They're the ones kind of helping think through this, but our RevOps managers are the ones bringing the problem, doing all the, testing. It's kind of like, again, product managers working with engineers and making that happen. So we do have go-to-market engineers in terms of the skills that we're looking for there. It's really, again, AI native, really thinking through systems. We're not hiring engineers that necessarily have like, coding experience, et cetera. Again, if you do, that's great. But we're hiring people who have kind of also grown up a little bit with AI and so have been like, either like studying with AI or either like in their last job have been with AI, and that's been really successful. So I would say more on the junior side of things, but also the way that I would say like when I interview people for these types of roles, whether it is like, your traditional RevOps or even go-to-market engineers, like I really like to understand like, are you keeping a pulse on like what is out there? And so really talking about like, okay, like what are the latest tools that you're really excited about? Like, what have you tried? Because that gives me a really good understanding of like, are you in tune with what's happening in the market right now versus not? And knowing that you've read the latest thing in the last 3, 4 weeks, I'm like, okay, like you read newsletters, you think through all of that. And then the other piece is if you are on the candidate side, is really keeping up with everything that's happening on the side.
Yeah. You're never gonna you're never gonna know everything. You're never gonna have experience with all the different types of tools and technologies, and you're never gonna have experience with all the different problems that, have been solved or not solved before, or maybe companies that are at a specific size or stage or in a specific industry. But when it comes to revenue operations, you need to demonstrate what you just said, which is demonstrate the ability to be able to figure that stuff out, and showing that you or hiring for people that demonstrate that is how you win. And you mentioned the growing up in like with AI. I just want to point out I have two boys. My oldest is in third grade, and I just like asked him the other day like how school was. They have these things called specials. He said he had his tech special. I was like, oh, what did you guys do in your tech special today? And he was like, oh, we used AI. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, we trained we trained an AI to know what a fish looked like, and then we would give it pictures. Some were fish, some were not, and it would tell us if it was a fish or not. And I was like, you talk about growing up with like new technology. Like I don't really remember what I was doing in third grade, but I didn't have a computer. I can assure you that. Definitely wasn't using anything AI related. So it'll be very interesting to see how things progress. I just wanted to share that little nugget that third graders everywhere apparently are also experimenting with AI.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, Cass, this was this was great. I want to thank you very much for spending an hour with us, dropping some knowledge, and all the attendees out there. Thank you very much for joining. And that's all I got for you. I will let you all run. See you at the flip side. Everybody.